Starting off with a couple questions for us this morning. First, do you tremble at the troubles and evils of the world? So do you watch in the news about warfare between nations? Recently, I did a little deep dive into reading about how the drone warfare is happening between Ukraine and Russia. It's a little scary. Do you read about human displacement because of said warfare? Do you listen to how the poor of a community go hungry? Do you see how neighbors turn on each other because of race or privilege? Do you understand how real people forego medical treatment and suffer because they can't pay the bills? Do you tremble at the troubles, at the evils of the world? I expect, of course, that most of us do recognize and tremble at the troubles and the evils of the world. In fact, sometimes that kind of conversation dominates conversations with each other and in the news, of course, because bad news sells. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to focus on. But here's a more difficult question, and it's a more important question. Do you tremble because you know that you are a part of those troubles? Do you tremble because you know that you are a part of those evils? Do you see all of it out there? And of course it shakes you, but do you see it in you? And does that shake you at all? Honestly, I hope that we're all saying within our hearts and minds right now that we do see it, that it does shake us, and that we do know we are, as humans, as individuals, as a community overall, that we are a part of the problem. I hope this because it means we are not emotionally or spiritually callous. It means we are not completely captured by self-interest. It means that we recognize the sin and brokenness in our hearts. And such recognition means there is hope for our soul, for your soul. And I say this because when we know that something is wrong, we hope, obviously, that it can be fixed, which means that we look for something to fix it, which means we must trust something. We open ourselves up to trusting something, to have the ability to overcome what troubles us. Recognizing our sin means recognizing our need to be saved and therefore have the Savior. So in our text for today, Jesus Christ, after his miraculous transfiguration upon the mount, our preceding text, he descends from this mountain and finds his other disciples obviously unable to work a healing miracle. the expectation is that they are able to work this. Before this chapter, Jesus had sent the disciples out to do wonderful things in the name of the Lord, of course, right? The father of the sick and demon-possessed child begs Jesus for relief and for healing. And to this situation, Jesus says a rather stunning thing. You unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Jesus says this because the people before him, disciples, the people in the crowd, everyone, they are struggling to recognize the true problem of the fullness of their sin. Because of their sin and brokenness, the disciples and the children of Israel and every human who ever was and ever will be, well, they can't fix the situation, being their sin and brokenness, without the work of the Savior. And right now, Jesus has come down from the mountain and is watching the disciples be all flustered that they can't work a miracle, which they were given the authority previously to do by Jesus. It's kind of like this: Jesus, why don't we know? Forgive me. Jesus, we don't know why we can't fix this situation. We don't know. We're confused. This is surprising. We should be able to handle this. And Jesus is essentially saying to them, well, of course you can't. You never could. You always have needed and will continue to need my power, my righteousness. But you have forgotten that, and you are going about your day as if it is your own efforts and ability that will solve things. You've pushed me off to the side, and you have elevated your own efforts. As a parent or a caretaker of a child, do you remember that moment where they are so flustered, they are so frustrated, they're trying to do something, clearly they need help, and you say, hey, let me, and they're like, no, I want to do it. But they're obviously angry that they can't do it. That's a child example, but quite frankly, how many of us adults go about that? It's important to note that the disciples and the people, they do see that they're struggling. They see that. What they don't see is that they need the complete power of the Savior to help them completely. They think, yeah, it's our effort and you. No. None of your effort is going to solve this. It's all the Savior. Jesus speaks his words and works this amazing miracle for the child because of the simple and yet essential truth that humanity can't fix its own problem of sin and evil and all the troubles that come with it. Humanity is stuck. In fact, humanity is so lost, it is so stuck, that it can't even see that there's no hope for them unless the Savior helps them. They are so lost. Now, as I said just a moment ago, Jesus has come down from the mount after having experienced the transfiguration. I keep saying that. What does that mean? Well, it is a miraculous moment in which Jesus is filled essentially with his own glory as the Son of God upon the mount. And it represents for the children of God a realization of what we call the Old Testament, but the Testament hope, the promises. God is keeping his promise of delivery and restoration, and he is doing so through this person who is the Son of God, the Messiah, Jesus Christ. It is an important moment because the transfiguration represents the affirmation of heaven that Jesus Christ is the answer to all of Israel's prayers for deliverance from trouble and evil. This is who Jesus is. And Jesus has not been silent about it. The people of Israel, this crowd in front of Jesus, the disciples should be fully recognizing who Jesus is, and they should be responding in joyful, jubilant, and the other words that I could find in the thesaurus. They should be filled with happiness, happy tears of faith. They should be so filled with recognition of the Savior that they would never try, let alone attempt, that might be redundant as well, I just said the same thing twice, but whatever, to solve their problems and troubles of sins without Jesus. Would you attempt to drive a nail through a piece of wood using only your fingers if there was a hammer laying right there on the table next to you? Maybe the curious of us would try, but of course, the hammer's right there, right? You would want to use the power of the hammer, knowing that the power of your own efforts would never accomplish the work that needed to be done. And in our text, Jesus looks upon his disciples who lack faith. Jesus looks upon a father who despairs. Jesus looks upon the children of God and sees confusion. Confusion. And therefore, a confused hopelessness. The children are so lost that they can't even see that heaven has sent the very Son of God to rescue them and restore them to righteousness with God. But despite this hopelessness of humanity, despite this hopelessness of his own disciples that he's been spending so much time with up to this point in Luke, Jesus takes the child. And we are to know that this child is, well, it was a real child, but also is us. Jesus takes this child, rebukes the evil, and completely heals this little boy and gives him back to his father. Do you see how Christ does that for us? He takes us, rebukes our sin, covers us in his righteousness, and gives us back to the Father. Despite the hopelessness of humanity, Jesus has compassion and works his power. It is through this miracle that Jesus declares his righteousness as stronger than evil. It is stronger than the troubles of this world. It is stronger than the sin of every human in this Jewish community and in this ancient Roman world and even in this modern day world. Have you ever heard the phrase, greater is he who is in us than what? He who is in the world. Jesus Christ is the answer to how to solve the problems and evils of this world. He's not part of the answer. He is the answer. But as I pointed out and asked earlier at the start of this, you need to first recognize that there is and are, of course, problems in this world, and you certainly need to recognize that you, yourself, are a part of that problem. Because you don't need a Savior if you don't think you need saving. So as we wrap up, just a couple takeaways. I kind of just shared two of them. Recognizing the evil of the world. Most of us can check that box. Recognizing your contribution to that evil. That takes a little bit of introspection and reflection. I pray that you can check that box, if you will. But maybe a next step is then, therefore, trusting that the fix to all of this cannot come from within us. How many of you grew up in a household with you pull yourselves up by your own, what? Bootstraps. We can't do this with our sin. That means opening up your heart and mind to trusting that you cannot fix this, which means committing fully to something else untouched by this sin, which means trusting and committing to Jesus Christ, the only fix. So I guess we're ending then with a call to believe in Jesus, or a reminder to turn your eyes and heart back fully to Jesus. And it's in his name that the mission of life, the mission of your life, therefore, is to share, to be active sharers. Is that right to say it that way? Sharers of this good news, of this hope that comes to us freely, that is given to us in compassionate love, the fullness of the power of heaven given as a gift, undeserved, unearned, and yet is there. Is the mission of your life about sharing that good news? That's where I'll leave the challenge for us this morning.